If you've got a tub of sugar-free ice cream in your freezer right now, there's a good chance it contains something linked to a higher risk of blood clots in people over 60. And no, it's not some rare ingredient you'd never come across. It's in most of the healthy ice cream sitting on your grocery store shelf right now, hiding behind words like guilt-free and keto-friendly. I run Smart Grocery Senior, and here's what I actually do. I read these labels the way a food scientist would, not the way the marketing team wants you to read them. Today, it's ice cream. And if you want me to keep naming names, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because honestly, that's the whole point of this channel. So here's how I approached this one. I pulled 14 products, all marketed specifically as the healthy option. Not regular ice cream, the ones already claiming to be better for you. Low sugar, sugar-free, high protein, keto, plant-based, all of it. And I checked 5 things on every single tub, not just the obvious stuff. What sweetener they used, and what that sweetener actually does inside a body over 60. What's really hiding behind the word protein on a protein ice cream? Whether the serving size on the label is even realistic, or whether it's been quietly shrunk to make the numbers look better. What natural flavor and all those gums and stabilizers actually break down to once you look closer. And since a lot of you have asked me about this in the comments before, whether plant-based or dairy-free actually means healthier, or whether that's its own separate trick. My bar for passing wasn't just low sugar. It had to be something a 65 or 70-year-old body could actually handle without causing a problem down the line, because that's a different standard than what works fine for someone in their 20s. Let's start with the big one. Honestly, it's probably sitting in your freezer right now. When something says sugar-free, that sugar has to be replaced with something else. And almost every sugar-free ice cream on the shelf right now is using a sugar alcohol to do it. Usually erythritol, sometimes maltitol or sorbitol. And here's the part nobody puts on the front of the box. Sugar alcohols aren't fully absorbed by your digestive system. In a younger body, that mostly just means a little bloating if you overdo it. But in an older body, especially if you're already dealing with a sensitive gut, IBS, or diverticulitis, sugar alcohols can cause real discomfort at a completely normal serving. Not even an excessive one. And this is where it gets more serious. Erythritol specifically has been studied by researchers at the Cleveland Clinic, and they found a connection between elevated erythritol levels in the blood and higher rates of blood clotting events, including stroke and heart attack, especially in people who already carry some cardiovascular risk. Now, to be fair, this research is still being followed up on, and having erythritol in your blood after eating something with it isn't automatically dangerous for everyone. But the pattern the researchers found was consistent enough that several cardiologists have started advising higher-risk patients to limit it, and that's worth taking seriously, not dismissing. That's not some small internet study either. That's a major research institution looking closely at a sweetener that's now sitting inside an enormous number of healthy frozen desserts, protein bars, and keto snacks. And it's not always spelled out clearly. Sometimes it's buried in a blend, listed as erythritol monk fruit extract, which makes it sound like monk fruit is the star of the show, when really erythritol is doing most of the heavy lifting in that tub. So if you're managing high blood pressure, you're on blood thinners, or you've got any history of cardiovascular issues, and you've been reaching for the sugar-free option because it felt like the responsible thing to do, you're exactly the group this research is raising a flag for. Now, I'm not saying panic over one bowl. I'm saying read the sweetener list, not just the words printed on the front. And if you're in that higher risk group, this is worth a quick conversation with your doctor next time you're in for a checkup, not something to just guess about. Now let's talk about the protein tubs, because these have basically taken over the freezer aisle the last couple of years. And they're marketed almost like a health food at this point. 20 grams of protein, low sugar, sounds like a pretty clear win, right? Well, this is where it gets a little more complicated. To be fair to whey protein, it's actually one of the more absorbable, well-used proteins out there. So if you're waiting for me to tell you the protein itself is fake, it's not. The real issue is what that protein gets stacked with. Most of these products combine an isolated whey or milk protein with the same sugar alcohols we just talked about, plus added fiber, usually chicory root or inulin, just to pad out the texture and bring down the carb count on the label. And that combination right there, sugar alcohol plus added isolated fiber, is what's actually behind most of the digestive complaints people report. Not the protein on its own. Put those two together, and they tend to overwhelm digestion in a way neither one does by itself. And older adults are more likely to already be managing some gut sensitivity, whether that's from medication, a past surgery, or honestly just changes that come naturally with age. So a protein ice cream that a 30-year-old eats without a second thought can leave a 65-year-old dealing with real discomfort that same night. The 20 grams on the label isn't the lie here, it's what's riding along with it that causes the trouble. And I'll add, if you're taking a protein ice cream specifically to help maintain muscle mass, which is a completely reasonable goal after 60, you're often better off with a small serving of plain Greek yogurt and a scoop of a simple protein powder. You control yourself, rather than a dessert engineered to hit a marketing number. There's another one worth catching, and honestly, this one frustrated me the most while I was researching it because it's the most deliberate of the bunch. A lot of these healthy pints are technically only 380 to 460 milliliters instead of the standard 473 milliliter pint that regular ice cream comes in. That's not an accident. That's a specific choice. And it lets a brand advertise something like only 90 calories per serving, while quietly defining a serving as a third of the container instead of a half. And let's be honest, nobody's sitting down at 8 p.m. with a kitchen scale measuring out exactly 1/3 of a pint. Most people eat what looks like a normal bowl, and that's usually closer to half the container, sometimes more. So once you do the real math, the amount people actually eat in one sitting, several of these low-calorie tubs land within 40 or 50 calories of a regular full-fat ice cream. The calorie count on the label isn't fake. The serving size is just built to make that number look a lot better than the way people actually eat it. This is honestly one of the easiest tricks to catch once you know it's there, because it only takes checking one number against another. But it's also one of the easiest to miss if you're just glancing at the calorie count like most of us were taught to do. Now here's one a lot of people don't think to question at all, and that's the plant-based or dairy-free label. There's an assumption out there that if something is dairy-free, it's automatically the healthier choice, and that's not really true. A lot of plant-based ice creams lean on coconut cream or palm oil as their base. And while that avoids dairy, it doesn't avoid saturated fat. In some cases, it actually has more saturated fat per serving than a dairy version of the same flavor. On top of that, because plant-based milks don't have the same natural creaminess dairy does, these products often need more gums and stabilizers to get a smooth texture, which brings us right back to that natural flavor and thickener issue we're about to get into. None of this means dairy-free is a bad choice. If you're lactose intolerant or you avoid dairy for another reason, it can absolutely be the right choice for you. It just means dairy-free and healthier aren't automatically the same word, and that's worth knowing before you assume one guarantees the other. Before we get to the last one, I want you to notice something. These aren't 5 separate problems we've been going through. They're really the same handful of moves, just rearranged depending on the brand. Sweetener swaps, ingredient stacking, shrunk servings, base substitutions, and vague labeling. Once you learn to spot one of these, you start noticing all of them, everywhere else in the store too, not just in the ice cream aisle. So, natural flavors. This is the one most people skim right past because it sounds completely harmless. But it's a legal term, not really a description of anything. It can legally include dozens of chemical compounds, as long as the original source was technically natural at some point, and companies aren't required to tell you what those compounds actually are because it's considered proprietary information. Same goes for a lot of the texture agents, things like guar gum and carrageenan. Carrageenan specifically has been studied for its potential to trigger inflammation in the digestive tract. And while that research is still developing, it's exactly the kind of ingredient worth keeping an eye on if you're already managing an inflammatory condition, which a lot of adults over 60 are, whether that's arthritis or a digestive issue. None of these things are illegal, by the way. Nothing here is hidden in a way that breaks any law. And honestly, that's what makes it worse, not better. The whole system is built around the assumption that nobody reads past the front of the package, and for most people, that assumption is correct. If your freezer has one of these in it right now, tell me which one down in the comments. I'm reading every single one. And I genuinely want to know how many of you have been dealing with exactly what I just described, without ever connecting it back to the tub sitting in your freezer. All right, here's the part I really want you to stick around for, because this isn't a video where everything fails. After going through all 14, 5 of them held up under every single check I ran. And that doesn't mean the other 9 are going to hurt you over one scoop here or there. It just means these 5 are the ones you don't have to think twice about. The pattern across every one that passed was pretty consistent. They used small amounts of real sugar instead of leaning on sugar alcohols, kept the ingredient list short enough that you could read it out loud without tripping over it, and were upfront about serving size instead of shrinking the container just to flatter the label. A few used monk fruit or a modest amount of cane sugar as the main sweetener instead of erythritol. And that matters because monk fruit on its own, without erythritol blended in, doesn't carry the same concerns from that research. Others simply accepted a slightly higher calorie count in exchange for real cream and real sugar in sensible amounts. And for most people over 60 without diabetes, that's actually the safer trade to make. A smaller treat made with honest ingredients beats a bigger treat engineered to just look harmless. Now, where you shop actually changes how easy this is too. And I think that's worth mentioning because it's genuinely practical. If you're shopping somewhere like Trader Joe's or Sprouts, the ingredient lists across their frozen aisle tend to run shorter across the board, so you're already starting from a better position. At a bigger chain like Kroger or Walmart, the healthy-looking options and the heavily engineered options sit right next to each other on the same shelf. So that's exactly where this 15-second habit matters most, because visually, the packaging gives you almost no clue which one you're looking at. You don't need to memorize 14 products, and you definitely don't need to become a food scientist to shop smarter next week. Here's the one habit that catches almost everything we just talked about. Flip the container over and find the sweetener first, before you even glance at the calorie count. If erythritol shows up in the first 3 ingredients, or it's blended with monk fruit, but still sitting high up on that list, put it back, no matter what the front of the package is promising you. Then check the serving size against the actual size of the container. If a pint is claiming 4 or more servings, that's your sign the serving size has been shrunk just to make the numbers look better. Those 2 checks together take maybe 15 seconds, and they catch most of what's really going on in this entire category. And I want to say this plainly. This isn't about cutting ice cream out of your life completely. Nobody needs to do that. This is about knowing which 15 seconds to spend reading a label, so the choice in your freezer is actually your choice, and not one the marketing department already made for you. If this changed how you're going to shop this week, let me know in the comments. And if you've already caught one of these same tricks on something else in your pantry, tell me what it was, because that's exactly what I want to dig into next. Next week, I'm running this same breakdown on protein bars marketed to seniors, and one of the biggest names in that category failed worse than anything you saw here today. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you in the next one.